Hello, I'm Kim Warren, and I would like to tell you about the background to my book, The Trouble with Strategy. Now, you might be wondering, first of all, why you should care about this. But the reality is that just about everyone suffers because of the bad strategy done by businesses throughout the world, really. You suffer if you're a customer. You don't get the products or services that you could get. You end up paying more than you should for what you do get. You suffer if you're an employee. The least you might expect when you go to work, apart from coming home not injured or otherwise damaged, is that the people who run your businesses know where they're going with them so that you have a stable and secure future and a solid career in front of you. You suffer, of course, if you're an investor. Companies destroy huge quantities of cash and stock prices go up and down all over the place because of bad strategy. But you may say, well, who cares about those fat cats in Wall Street or the City of London? Well, you should care about that, because if you've got a pension or insurance or savings, that money gets invested in these companies, and when those stock prices go horribly wrong and companies destroy cash flow, it's your money that's getting damaged. And lastly, you should care if you're a taxpayer. We've seen in the latest recession how the governments in various parts of the world had to bail out banks. Well, it's not just about bailing out the banks. The taxpayers pick up the bill when people get made redundant and there's unemployment, and governments suffer a loss of tax revenue when companies fail or simply underperform. So basically, when people mess up strategy, they damage your life. We have all kinds of different mistakes being made in strategy, and they range from the huge to the big to the middling size to quite small ones. So let's start with a couple of examples. Let's take one really huge mistake, and this starts with the story of two pretty successful companies. First, we have eBay, really successful at creating this marketplace for people to trade all kinds of things between themselves. And we have Skype, the free internet-based phone service. Well, wasn't it a good idea when in 2005 eBay bought Skype and paid $2.6 billion because management claimed there would be great synergies arising to the benefit of both companies? Well, barely 2 years later, eBay wrote off $1.4 billion on the cost of that purchase, and the two companies ended up going their separate ways. We have big mistakes in other parts of the global economy. Here we have a chart of the amount of ships being ordered by the world shipping industry. Huge big boom in orders being placed in 2006 and 2007, way more than global trade would ever have had any need for. Now, as it happened, not all of that shipping got built, but quite a lot of it did get built. And what got built was, as I say, far more than global trade actually needed. What's the result of this? Well, many of those ships have since been used as floating car parks in the oceans outside harbours like Shanghai, or they're being driven up onto the beaches of northern India where they're being taken apart for scrap. Huge waste of natural resources and huge damage to the environment, on top of the vast amounts of money that have just been wasted on this unfortunate episode. We have mid-sized mistakes a bit closer to home, a bit more familiar to you and I probably. Starbucks has been a great company and done very well over many years, but they too have made a mistake. In 2008, 2009, there was a huge drop in their operating income, following a period where they pushed prices too high and basically didn't give consumers good value. And on top of that, in the period running up to that, they wasted at least $200 million opening 500 stores that simply weren't any good. Now, how do we know that there were 500 stores that weren't any good? Because that's the number they closed in 2008 and 2009. Two little extra pieces to this story. First of all, this is exactly the same mistake that McDonald's made just a few years earlier, and you can actually find that in McDonald's annual reports from 2001. And the other issue to raise here is that this was not solely driven by the recession. Competitors in the same sector did not suffer this degree of damage to their operating profits during the same period. Let's turn to another sector where there have been some middling-sized mistakes. This is the number of low-fare airlines operating in Europe during the 2000s. It's a very exciting industry. Everyone thinks low-fare airlines are absolutely great. So it's no surprise that during that period, quite a lot of airline executives decided to pile into this particular version of running an airline. Of course, not all of them were going to succeed, and it's hardly surprising that over that same period, particularly in the later years of the period, a number of those didn't exactly do so well and crashed and left the industry. Now, over that period, we've added about 12 airlines altogether by the time you've added those that have been started and taken away those that have failed. So, maybe we started 20 and 8 went bankrupt. Well, no, we started 60 low-fare airlines and 48 failed. You can find much more information about this particular example in my case study on the European low-fare airline industry. So we have huge strategy errors and we have big strategy errors, and these are the ones that we all see. We read about them in the paper, we sometimes even hear about them on the television. But on top of that, we've got lots of middling sized mistakes and small mistakes being made all the time. And the small mistakes that you never hear about consist of things like businesses constantly struggling to make progress and to survive, or simply failing to achieve what they could achieve if they really got their strategic act together. I've just mentioned just a few examples of strategy failures, and you'll find all kinds of sources of other examples. I just mentioned one here, a book by Professor Rummelt called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. So where do you find strategy failure then? Well, we've talked about failure in shipping, we talked about it in airlines, we talked about it in retail, and we talked about the failure of eBay and Skype. You'll find strategy failures in the construction industry, in the insurance industry, and we all remember the pain everyone paid because of the subprime mortgage nonsense in the real estate industry. So basically, you find strategy mistakes everywhere. And when you add this all up, the sum total of all this is really very serious indeed. This is what happened to the different elements of GDP in the United States from 2005 to 2011. It wasn't government who caused the recession. It wasn't consumers causing the recession by cutting back on their personal spending. It was the corporate sector. And as Professor Paul Ormerod has found in his research, pretty much every recession, apart from those caused by wars and commodity crises, can be laid at the door of corporate management. Businesses lead the world into recession, and people and governments pay the price in subsequent years. In spite of everything I've said, I am not blaming management for this. Generally speaking, our great corporations have good leaders, effective operations, they're efficiently run, and management do their best with strategy, and some of them do a really great job of strategy as well. The problem is, that's not the norm. The bad strategy is pretty widespread. If it's not management's fault, what's the problem? The problem is that strategy doesn't work. We use abstract and ambiguous language to talk about it, and we can't even be precise about what we mean by performance or competitive advantage. We don't know what causes what. We can't explain success, and all our efforts to do so seem to fall apart when we find exceptions. We've produced methods that don't work or that management don't find useful, so they just ignore them. And what we're left with instead is people follow fads and slogans for doing strategy. Lastly, there are no recognised standards as to what good strategy actually is, and as a result we have poor practice. So it's not management's fault, it's our fault because we haven't given them the tools to do strategy really well, and this can be fixed, and that is the topic of the book.